topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
To Triversity Talk. I'm your host, Wendy Stewart. I'm always so happy to see you all on a Wednesday night. You know, like Wednesday is hump day, and it's really the icing on the cake for me to be here on Wednesday nights and have all these great guests and get to talk to my audience, even though it's virtual, right? I know that you're out there. I know you can see me. I know you can hear me. Oh, and for those of you this week that were going to the Port Jervis Fall Festival, I hope you stopped by the Triversity table. I was there in the morning, and I have to tell you, it was just really, I don't know, reaffirming in human beings to be at that table. For those of you who are listening in other parts of the United States, Triversity is the LGBTQ center out of Milford, Pennsylvania, and we support the tri-state area. And every time we get to do an event where we get to do what we call tabling, it's wonderful because you're dealing with the public. And the thing I love the best about it were the people that came up to the table, everything from teenagers that said, hey, we know about Triversity Center and we want to come by. You could tell it made them feel like they had a place, a safe space. But I think the thing that always is the most amazing to me is the grandparents that'll come up and say, hey, I have a trans grandchild and I love my grandchild. I want to do everything I can to support them. And to be able to support and give information to people like that is absolutely everything. You know, with all the stuff going on in the world, it really makes you feel like you're doing something. So again, if you're in the New York, New Jersey, or Pennsylvania area upstate, please stop by the Triversity Center. We have a great resource book. We have a lending library. We have game nights. We have a book club. We have everything. And speaking of books, tonight's guest is a very familiar face. She's been on Triversity Talk before, both as a co-host, sometimes as a guest, sometimes as a panelist, but she's a very special person to me. Simone Kraus is the former vice president of Triversity Center in Milford and now co-founder of her own organization with her wife, Mary. It's called Homeward. You can find them on Facebook. And she's currently on the board of Out Montclair and La Brujas Club. I never say that correctly. I can never get that roll. But you can go online and read more about them. The thing about Simone, I don't want to read from a bio because I'm just ready to burst with pride so much tonight. 6 years ago, Simone wanted to get her story out there. And after a false lead that was very hurtful for the people that were involved, because, you know, there are all kinds of people that will say, hey, you know what, it's not going to cost you very much. They will take your money and, you know, tell you they're going to help you do a book. And it happens more often than not. And this was a not, right? Here we go. Fast forward 6 years later. Her book is 454 pages, wonderfully long, filled with content, beautifully structured, and an incredible memoir about her life. Please welcome Simone Kraus. Hey.
Hey, how we doing?
Welcome to the show. This is so great. I'm so excited having you on, and here, everybody, here is the book. I'm only halfway through it. It's a great book. You wrote a great book.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there was a lot I had to put into it. It took a village to do this.
Right.
I mean, when I first wrote this, it was like I was writing it for my therapist. So I just kind
Okay.
of wrote everything down, wrote it down, and then I came across someone at my church, and Lizzie Walker,
Oh yeah.
who Lizzie, who helped me kind of weed out the stuff and write, and she taught me how to write. And what I wanted to do is that I actually saw on HBO Bruce Springsteen on Broadway. And before he played one of his songs, he told his story. And I said, I want to write just like that.
Oh, that's right. What was it about his story that got to you, Simone?
It was actually about his hometown and how his father was teaching him to drive, and that just touched me so much, the way he explained it. And I said, I want to be able to write and explain things like that.
Well, Bruce Springsteen is very down home, Jersey boy. You're very Jersey girl.
Yeah.
Born and raised, everything about you. And that was, I think, an incredible direction for you because that is who you are. And that's what comes through in the book from, your relationships with your family, what happened to you in school, from your career as a pipe fitter and your relationships with those dudes. All of that comes through. And there's not only an incredible honesty to the book, I love the way you wrapped it around the current events at the time. How did you come up with that for a concept?
You know what it is for writing the book, and as I had to write it, what I would do is I would think of where either I was in school or what job I was on before I went to bed. And I would then play over in my head. And when I woke up in the morning, I'm most creative around 4:00 in the morning. I'd get up and I'd get about 1 hour of creativity, and I would just write and write and write about that time period. So that's how I came about with all that. And I had to really look up dates of different things that happened. So that would trigger where I was on different jobs.
I think, by the way, that is a brilliant way of working. We've had a number of writers on the show. Everyone has a different process, but I totally love your process. I do love that your most creative time, right? You knew it was 4 a.m. and that's when you would write for your hour or so. So you didn't push it past that. People hit the wall, as they call it, and writer's block, and it gets in the way for them. But you were really connected, that you understood that your best work could be done at that time. I think that it's a wise choice. I love I'm big on backstory. Like I always want to know, how do you get from A to B? And this is really, really something. The story itself is intriguing. People could say, you're Simone Kraus, right? You're not president of the United States. You're not a multi-million-dollar trust fund baby. You don't have a film coming out. You're Jenny from the block, as I am. How does Jenny from the block tell their story so that people are going to be so completely engaged, right, that they can't put it down, like myself? And I have to tell you, I'm so interested. I never gave a hoot about pipe fitting. I knew you were a pipe fitter when I met you. And, what would I care about pipe fitting? It's not anything that ever enters into my existence other than, if you need a plumber and they got to do something with your pipes, right? That's true for most people. And yet the fact that you wrap the book around what that was your livelihood. And then the picture that you painted of such a male machismo environment. And here you had a deep secret, and yet you had to get up and go to work in that environment. I'd like to start like in the very beginning. And I want you to tell people, from the time you were little, you knew that there had been a mistake made.
Oh yeah, I knew at the age of 5. And I talk about it in the book, getting up to bat for the first time, wiffle ball. and my brother was on the mound. And it's funny when you kind of remember these memories.
Yeah.
It's like it flips back and forth. Like one moment, I'm right there holding the bat, and I can see my brother out on the mound. And another time was I'm thinking about it, it's like I'm sitting up on the roof of the house, and I'm looking at the whole thing play out in front of me. And
Wow.
and that's when I knew. He walked in, and I got up lefty just naturally. First time at bat, I see him walk in. He's got his kid sneakers on and white t-shirt, and he turns me around. He goes, and this is like 1962, 63. Only girls hit from that side. He turns me around, and I'm like, yeah, okay, something's not right here. I'm a girl. And
Well,
that's
it was kind of like if you were a lefty, he told you to hit the ball with your right hand. For
yep,
anybody, that would be like, okay, something is just
yep,
not right.
yeah, exactly, yeah. And that's when I first really kind of had the realization that something was off, you
Right.
know. And it wasn't until I was 9 years old, and 1966 encyclopedia, flipping through because my parents, I was a horrible student in school, and they bought these brand new world encyclopedias so that I could
Remember those?
would try to learn something. So, and I'm flipping through the JK, and all of a sudden I come across Christine Jorgensen, and I'm like, oh my God,
Fascinated, right?
I am not the only one in the world that
Right.
feels like this. And I knew that there was others like me. And that's when I definitively knew, was when I
Wow.
was, 1966 was a big year. So
Yeah. Yeah, very pardon the using the phraseology, but very transitional in your life because it was an awakening. All along, you knew something wasn't quite right, but
mhm,
in a way, finding Christine Jorgensen, and I remember my mother telling me about Christine Jorgensen, and I found it completely fascinating that somebody could be born and identified by somebody else at birth, named by how they looked biologically, but yet they were a totally different person inside. And the inside meaning up here, right?
mhm, yep.
What goes on in the brain. And you and I have had those discussions a lot. So you basically trying to get through school. You said you weren't a good student. You also in your book reference this thing called distractions. Wendy Kohler was on last week, also talked about those distractions. Can you explain to people, because I think that is an intrinsic part of this whole transition, right? What are those distractions?
Mostly when I got older, that's when the distractions really helped me. And it was hobbies.
Right.
Some people, use alcohol or drugs as their distractions. I
Yeah.
used hobbies, and I would get so deep into a hobby. I would learn everything about it that I was thinking about it 24/7. And if I was at work, I would stay so busy at work that I didn't have time to think about the hobbies, but that distracted you. And then eventually you learn everything about that hobby, and it kind of like wanes away, and it's like you have to find another one.
Right. I got that because, I know your connection to the martial arts. I did
Mhm.
not know about scuba diving, that you were, I hate using the word obsessed, but you were like
Oh yeah.
OCD'd over it. Everything that you got into 150%. And all of a sudden that takes up your focus. Do you think your focus got taken up on that because it got you away from thinking about how wrong you felt inside?
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah,
I was going to die with this secret.
right.
I figured that, once I got to the point I fell in love with Mary, I was like, I'm tough enough. I'm going to die with the secret. This is going to go to the grave with me. And I write about it in the book. It's like, okay, when I get reincarnated, I'm going to
Right.
get it right that
I'm
time.
I'm coming back as a woman.
Exactly.
I guess
And
it makes me so sad that what you said, I'm going to die with this secret, because right now, all over the country, there are people living with that
mhm,
secret and knowing that something's not right, and they'll go through their entire life that way. I do feel that by somebody like you coming out and telling your story in the detail that you have, it will be a big help for other people. In the same way you discovered Christine Jorgensen, because she was the only example. I know we had the Encyclopedia Britannica. I know exactly what you're talking about, but she was the only example at the time. And we had no point of reference. So it was kind of like, that can be done. Wow. I wonder what made this person decide to do this. But it really wasn't a decision. It was something that it was their intention and they needed to do that. I think that it's important to differentiate with that. So the secret that you had growing up, you had to go to school. What was that like for you?
Oh, it's hard. Well, it's really hard because I always wanted to hang out with the girls. That's who I got along with. And I talk about in the third grade when Sister Charles kind of found me playing with the girls. Once you got to third grade and I was in a Catholic school, the boys played down in the lower lot and the girls were up on the upper lot.
Right.
And well, I got caught playing with my friends and she decided she was going to cure this and put pink ribbons in my hair and had me sit in the front of the class in a box and had everyone call me a sissy that afternoon, thinking that this would cure me. And it did. I mean, I was so terrified of having have something like that happen to me again that, I stopped hanging out with them.
Well, she created trauma. That's what that is. So I would like to believe that kind of thing would be completely illegal to do nowadays. Again, I would like to believe, and that it would be dealt with harshly. How awful for you to be objectified to that degree and made fun of. Just awful. And then, of course, they banished you from playing on the upper level with the girls after that.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And then I became a target to all the boys.
Of course, you would.
Which then eventually, my father taught my other sisters how to box. Tried to teach me, and I think after about 10 minutes, he just walked away shaking his head like, oh, this is not going to work. And that's when I found the judo. And I had enough tantrums that he actually signed me up for it. And that helped me a lot.
Right.
I could actually defend myself.
Yeah. It's interesting that you found something you would be good at.
Yeah. And that was my first really distraction. You and your
father were close.
Somewhat close. He worked a lot. There was 5 people in the family, Yeah,
right.
He was in construction. He worked a lot of overtime.
Right.
And, so you only had like a sliver of time to spend with them each, So when I had the opportunity, I did. Like every Saturday morning, he'd go down to the paper store to get his paper, get his cup of coffee, the Daily News, a carton of cigarettes, and hang out with the guys talking. And I got to go and just be a pain.
Right.
But, that's what I did.
Wow. So how were your relationships at the time with the rest of your family?
My 2 older siblings, they were 5 and 7 years older than I was. So we really, didn't hang out. And both of them were brilliant, where I struggled in school, So, but there was a far enough distance between us that we wouldn't have hung out. It was also in the midst of the 60s, which was, everything was changing. Women's rights, the war, so the whole structure of the nuclear family was changing.
Yeah, exactly.
So we didn't really hang out. And then I had 2 younger sisters, 2 years and 3 years younger than me. So most of the time was devoted to them. So, I mean, I got, I spent a lot of time alone and I was always the outsider with everybody. I write about it in the book. I was like the Omega Wolf.
Yeah.
So you're with the guys and there's a whole hierarchy with men. And I would be the one that, when they wanted to make fun of and beat up, and I was an easy target because I didn't get along with them. I didn't fit in.
Right. And it's incredible to me, though, that you stayed in this male-oriented environment and continued. You did your job as a pipe fitter. You would take jobs outside so you could be in the sun.
Yep.
Not be dealing with them. And you were in the sun even when it was really freezing cold in the winter. I can't imagine how much warmer you were because of the sun. I thought of you on top of a roof, with the pipe stuff and doing all of that. And these guys would make fun of you. You know, they it's
Well,
kind of like going into the lunchroom and nobody wants to sit with you. You had year after year of that. That's a lot.
you become a target, and you know what it is it's a pack mentality. You have the
Right.
alpha, the beta, and then all the other ones will follow in. And I, you know, there was other guys that would get picked on too consistently. But see, with what they would think of me, I mean, you couldn't even be gay at that time in the 70s, 80s, or
No.
90s, you know?
Definitely not with what you were doing. Absolutely not.
And
Right.
let alone trans, which is even less understood, you know?
Right.
So there was a lot of, and you had to develop this persona that people would not want to F with you at all.
Right.
Because they were actually afraid of what you might do. And a lot of the trans people that were in my support group also had that type of persona. So that when we did finally transition, everyone would be like, really? You're the last one I would have thought. So,
Right.
and it worked for a lot of years, you know, where just this, you could literally intimidate someone by just walking into the room and giving them a look. And that's why they would do stuff behind your back, because it's a sneaky way of doing it.
Well, yeah, and it still made them, you know, macho man to do that.
Mhm.
Do
Yep.
you think that they I don't even know if they had the language for trans, but did you think that they thought that about you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And you had to work with these guys every single day.
Well, the thing is, I would get sent to different jobs and stuff. And if I
But
ended
it
up with,
seems to be, yeah,
yeah, I mean,
it seems to
if
be the same
you
story.
would, right. Yeah. You ended up on the bigger jobs. Eventually people became a target and the shenanigans went on. And so it was always worked out really good. If I ended up on a small job, just two guys,
Yeah,
then I I was a very hard worker, very capable, so that whoever I was working with could really take it easy. So I was an asset. So
of course. Right. And you would focus on that job because if you were with one other person, you were really more in a safe environment
mhm.
where you could do, you know, do your thing.
Yep.
You talked in your book about Jade. Jade was trans, and again, I only got halfway through. I can't wait to read the rest of it, but Jade was someone you knew before she transitioned.
Yep. I remember when Jay transitioned, and I remember I talk about the day she came on the job after she transitioned, and how everyone was talking. You know, it was like this whole oddity was showing
Oh,
up.
they didn't want to use the bathroom, and she
Oh
had to
yeah,
have it was terrible.
yeah. Oh, it was horrible the way they treated her,
Right.
and stuff like that still happens today.
I would totally and completely believe that. I
You
mean,
know,
I guess the question I have, you say you weren't a great student in school. We know becoming part of a union and a trade, you make good money. But at any point, did you think I got to get out of this? I have to become something else, a different kind of career?
no, because I
You
knew
didn't?
if I got the years in, I'd have a pension, I'd have
Right. I hear
insurance,
you.
and you
Yeah.
just kind of you toughed it out. You know, I mean,
You
when I
toughed it
saw
out.
it, that's what you did. You toughed it out until the day you could retire and get out and say, "Adios, amigos."
Yeah, I know. Don't let the door hit you on the way out.
Exactly. You know,
But
I mean,
to
I got into the trades the day Elvis died, and on his 40th anniversary when he died is the day I retired. I just kind of picked that day because I was within like a week or two, and I said, I'm gonna do it
yeah,
this way, just kind of symbolic.
yeah.
Elvis has left the building.
But literally, it's interesting though. You transitioned at 56 and you were a pipe fitter for how many years?
40 years.
That is a very long time to take that kind of abuse. And I could see even further in the reading because of having Jade enter into the story, the kinds of things they said that you must have been like, you probably were thinking about surgery, but then they were having meetings, union meetings. We're not paying for Jade's surgery. I hope we just so completely insensitive, so hate filled.
Oh yeah, there was people that wouldn't want to work with her.
Right.
just because of who she was. They failed her on welding tests.
No,
And
I know. I saw the set. I learned more about the world of pipe fitting and welding than you can ever imagine from your book. It's really interesting because you're a late transitioner, and for those of you who don't know, it means exactly what it says: people that transition late in life, and it's all the stuff that comes with that, right? Because your life was one way for many, many years, and then it becomes a totally different thing. You lose family, you lose friends, you lose your job a lot of the time.
yes.
It's a total incomplete upheaval. And I always, when I talk with people, I really like to differentiate. This is my thing between a late transitioner and someone that transitions in their 20s. I had somebody on the show that I said to them, my God, you are so comfortable in your own skin. Yeah, I transitioned in college. What was your college like? Oh, we had professors that were trans. We had gay professors. There was a lot of arts taught in the school. Totally different thing. People cannot even begin to imagine. But my sweet spot, as you know, are late transition people, because I understand what it must be like for somebody to be one way their entire life and know what they're feeling is like, that they could feel better, that there would be a cure if they could live the life that they want to live, that they know they're supposed to live. But then there's all the stuff involved. I mean, that's no cakewalk either when you're in your 50s. I remember, like with you, the whole insurance thing that you went through.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. When you become late stage, trying to get certain things done with insurance, because insurance companies don't want to cover it,
Right.
which is always, always a challenge. Where you work, I mean, the amount of people I know late stage that you become, I call it the vortex. And what happens is now people are jealous because your surgeries are getting paid, and then they start to make up stories, and then they all start talking, and then you become the vortex, and which distracts the entire job and everything going on around it. So the company has no choice, they think, but to get rid of you, to get rid of the vortex, and hopefully then that'll bring like peace
Right.
back to the board.
Right.
Yeah, but it's horrible, and that's what happened. I mean, I got thrown out of a dojo like that,
That is
because I
the
became the
truth. I
vortex.
remember when that happened.
Yeah, yeah, and I know people that have been fired from their jobs or asked to leave because they became the vortex. And this happens even
Right.
today. And then unless you really have a lot of money or a good lawyer, a lot of times you just put your tail between your legs and go kind of reinvent your life.
Right. But that's not such an easy thing to do. What I'm learning, because I've done so many interviews with people that have transitioned, let's just say past 35. That's not even really late stage, but I've met a lot of people. It seems there's a lot of people that work in tech that are trans. I don't know what that connection is. However, my advice, go get a job in tech, because it seems to be a lot easier to do that. You can keep your job. No one seems to care. And the tech world is much more tolerant. Then forget about the blue collar job world. But, it could be anything. It could be if you're teaching in a small town, it could be anything. You become the vortex, and then you're ostracized.
Yeah. You're ostracized. And like I said, in today's climate, for the past 5 or 6 years, we are just prime target number one.
Right.
Anytime they want to create something, what do? They bring up transgender people.
Absolutely.
Teachers taking kids, and 2 days later they come back after surgery. I mean, they just make up stories, but people believe this, and then you become very hated just because of that, and you become a target.
You're targeted. It's made up stories so that you're targeted. What and I'm getting off the book a little, but I love talking to you. What do you think could change those attitudes?
It's going to be time. There's a couple things that have to really happen. One is I've been trying to get in New Jersey that every November would be designated Transgender Awareness Month. We have Transgender Awareness Week in this state, and right up to also Transgender Day of Remembrance. And that
Right.
was Babs Sipperstein who got that through. But we need to have that type of education. And it's going to be generational, that it's going to take time to repair the damage. And it's going to take probably good 10, 15 years, I think, where people, oh, trans, okay, it's kind of like saying, oh, you're a Buddhist,
Right.
that type of thing.
Well, but you know what? You hit the nail on the head. To me, that's how it always was, and how I never thought, honestly, twice about my friends transitioned in their 20s and 30s, but it wasn't anything I ever thought about as quote unquote different. And I guess what I'm asking you, Simone, is, yeah, you're saying it would take time, but what if in education, in curriculums, we had these discussions that this is part of on a spectrum, okay? People can be all different. Just like I don't know, Johnny has a good aptitude for math. Sarah's feeling like she wants to transition. Do you know what I mean by that? We take and we make it. It's not this big thing. It's just that people are all different.
Okay, there's a couple of things. If you had the Equality Act go through, where 1964 Civil Rights Act, we would gender identity, sexual orientation, and women would have rights if we had the Equality Act go through. That that is definitely one thing. But another thing is what gender dysphoria is. It's just genetics. It's I mean, that's all it is. I mean, just because you have an XY chromosome does not mean your brain goes like this. I mean, someone can be born with why is someone born with a cleft lip? Why is somebody born with red hair and blue eyes and both parents have brown hair and brown eyes? I mean, it's just genetics. So what happens with trans people most of the time, and in the small studies they've done, is that when my brain developed, it developed structurally female and neurologically female.
Absolutely.
And that's what people can't wrap their heads around. And that's why someone who identifies as male that was assigned female at birth, their brain is structurally like that.
And the structure of your brain is really who you are. It's not the other things I call window dressing. Right. All right. And you and I have had this conversation. But I've tried to have this conversation with other people, and it goes into, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? They can't understand the genetic component, which we both understand is core to this discussion that we're having, and it's core to human beings. And I don't know, it's something I think about all the time. For lack of a better word, a trans brain, meaning or what does our friend Francisco call it? Left brain, right brain. I don't care what you want to call it. It's something that's got to do with genetics, and it's what a person is. It's like the person that's got the aptitude to be an amazing singer. It's got to do with who you are, and it comes from the brain, and they're not doing enough studies on it. And I personally feel people's attitudes are not going to change until those articles start getting published, like all over the place, where you can't get away from it, where they come out and say, we have proven. I don't know, maybe then, although there'll always be religious people that say God made Adam and Eve and didn't make Eve and Liz, or Adam and Steve, or there's always going to be.
Everything we're talking about is actually in different parts of my book.
Right.
But I mean, if we were created in the image of God, I mean, it doesn't mean God was male. I mean, there was also female. But if you're saying that God was male and you had Adam, and then the rib came to here, well, then either Adam was intersexed and then Eve was the first trans woman. I mean, we were created in his image, they say, her image, God's image. There was no gender for God.
There was no gender for God. And there's a lot of cultures where God is viewed as female in their particular culture. So God is absolutely fluid, depending on who you talk to.
But yeah, just leave us alone. Let us
agree.
Live. And most late stage transitioners, because last week you were talking about passing and blending into society. And I gave this some thought. Passing is when I look in the mirror and look at myself and I'm like, yeah, I feel like I'm passing. That word is not a word that I use to judge anyone else, whether that applies to them. That is my singular word.
But you use it for yourself. But
For
instead of
yourself.
saying you blending, you say you're passing. That's interesting that you use it for yourself.
But I like to blend into the fabric of society.
Right.
But you need to work at this. I
Right.
mean, I do the voice lessons and I've been working at this. You know, I've been blessed with having a college that take me under their wing and that trains me with this, and that's the way a lot of us, there's nothing nicer than being able to walk into a place and no one looks at me differently. I'm treated as the woman that I am. I don't have any problems. And that's what I strive for. That's my journey. That's my transition. And most late stage transitioners, that's what we want.
Oh, of course. But as Wendy Cole referenced last week, the first time she walked into a Dunkin' Donuts, right? And what she was, and oh my God, how people were going to, it took her, the first time she couldn't get out of the car. And then she finally got, that's really tough stuff for people.
I talk about that in my book. I go in the whole story.
I can't wait.
It was to go to buy makeup.
Yeah.
And the same thing. When last week she was telling stories, I was laughing the whole time. I'm like, wow, yep.
Right.
Yep. Checking off the things. Check. Yep.
Right. It's good for people to hear each other because, as you know, there's tons of people that have had the same experiences. It's very supporting. And for people that haven't transitioned yet, that's why I do these shows. I want them to know, hey, there's a ton of people out there that are feeling what you're feeling. And so many people have been ostracized or bullied growing up or at their job. It's really good to know that you got a big world of people that are like you and they got your back,
Oh, yeah. And
that you shared similar life experiences. One of the things I really enjoyed was the way you referenced being accepted by those females that you were hanging out with when you were there. And I think you were at the beach or something, and you took true pleasure hanging out with the girls.
Well, yeah, that was my friends from Mawa.
Right.
Yep,
Mawa story.
Yep. And I hung out with them and had a great time and just blended right in. And in fact, the day I got married, I was running late to get to my wedding, and my friend dropped me off in the back. He swung around the front. Well, my 3 friends from Mawa showed up, and they were parked in the back of the church. So I see them. They're giving me big hugs and kisses. I'm walking in arm in arm, and the priest comes out of the back of the church and only sees 1 car, 3 women walking me in. And when I get to the door, I'll never forget, he grabbed my arm because he knew my mother for years in the family. And he said, things are going to have to change now that you're taking the vows of marriage. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, yes, Father. Yep. Let's get going. And it wasn't till later that I kind of clicked that, he thought I spent the night, showed up with them,
Right. Oh, but yeah, you were definitely profiled by the priest.
Yep, exactly. But yeah, I've always hung out with other women, felt more comfortable, could relate to them. And if I did have a friend that was male, they were usually a little more viewed as matriarchal than a patriarchal, I mean,
they had, so to translate that, more feminine, the men that were more, it's interesting because in my personal life, the men I like, gay men or straight men, have they're just obviously have a lot of feminine attributes.
Mm-hmm.
I really just don't, the super masculine, like, dude, never got it, never will. Even in the gay men that are that super masculine, like, when they're at the gym and they grunt, it makes me sick. I just don't get it. And you really gave me a lot of food for thought about who we as human beings are comfortable with, and we should be allowed to do that. How did Mary, your amazing wife, how did she become the one?
She was my best friend. I met her and she made me laugh. And when I laughed, I was like, I fell in love with her right then.
Right.
And then we started to date and then got married, and she's still my best friend, makes me laugh, You know,
Right.
she laughs all the time when she says something to me and I don't hear it right because my hearing's going. And she said she should write a book about that.
Bloopers, we would call it.
Yeah, exactly, you know. But
Right.
yeah, she's the most wonderful. She's the toughest woman I've ever met.
Yeah.
And I talk about her in the book. I call her Grizzle. You know, you can't chew her up. You know, she is
That's
just
a great nickname, by the way.
yeah. You know what it is I worked with a gentleman, George Bunsen, and he used to talk about his wife that way, that she was Grizzle. And I so admired my friend George. He taught me everything I knew about the trades because my father died when I was younger. He treated me like one of his own family.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I miss him every day as I do as much as my father, you know, and there's a lot that I learned from him.
Right. And you were lucky to have that relationship.
Blessed. I've lived a charmed life. As you know, you read the book, you might not think that, but I've lived a charmed life. I mean, from if I didn't transition, I never would have met you or anybody up there at Triversity. We would
This
not have
book,
had these wonderful friends and family.
thank you.
Never would have crossed paths, you know?
Right. But you were, as you said, you wanted to live your truth. And I think that's the lesson here, Simone, that's what people need to do. When you put on a jacket and it's too tight, it doesn't fit.
Mhm.
Okay. And it's being able to call out, hey, it doesn't fit. And that's not that easy, right? To dance to your own drum is not that easy. I do think you have a charmed life because you were very lucky that you met your soulmate. I mean, Mary has been with you literally through thick and through thin. And, you know, the two of you are one unit, and that's really in your lifetime to have that happen. You and I know mutual people that transitioned and they still would love to be with their partner,
Mhm.
and they're not.
Yeah.
They're not. And that is something that is missing for them because they love that person unconditionally, whether they had transitioned or not. But for the other person, sometimes it becomes a deal breaker. And then you get into that whole thing. I mean,
Well,
this
well,
is complex stuff.
well, for Mary, a lot of it too was not only our vows, but she likes this kind of version of me because I'm a lot nicer. I mean, because when you're hiding this, you are just
Yeah.
you're the absolutely really you're really the worst person around. I mean, you're really just you're angry, you're horrible, you're depressed, you just you know. And
Yeah.
I mean, right now we laugh each day. You know, it's just yeah, I'm truly blessed.
Right. You are. You had to go through whatever you had to go through to get to the other side. But, you know, here we are talking. How many years out from your surgery are you now?
Um, well, I had the surgery February 11th, 2021.
Yeah. So
So
here we
three
are in
three and a half years.
2024. And I remember everything leading up to that with the freaking insurance, and you had one insurance and then you lost that insurance. And the thing with your dojo group happened around then
Yep.
too, that they decided that you couldn't be part of that
Mhm.
anymore. And I think what amazes me about you, a lot of people just would have run for cover because it was so many things, and you just kept on. You kept on. You never lost sight of what you wanted to do,
You
what you
know,
had to do.
my father died when I was 14, and I really pretty much felt like I was on my own,
Right.
even though I had an older siblings and whatnot,
It's
because I
your
didn't
father.
relate. You know, I was pretty much made every decision. I was on my own, and I had to learn how to handle things and I learned how to be a nudge so that the people that really annoyed the hell out of me, I would get even somehow. And that was, I felt better about it, but
Right.
it's not a really good quality. But yeah, but like in the book, if you look at the book cover, there's so much to that book cover that
I'm holding it up for
so you have right now, you got the little up in the corner, you have the trans flag there. And
right,
what it is anybody who's trans, they see that, they know exactly what this book is about.
right.
And it's just a different wrapping, which my wife, that's how she referred to me. I said, but if you look at the label, I mean, usually the label on there, when you're given a gift, it goes to, from,
This is from.
to, which is kind of a cryptic way of I went from to. And the dragonfly, you have to read the book, but that has a big significant meaning in the whole book. the dragonfly.
Yeah, don't do a spoiler.
No, I'm not. But I mean,
I do have questions about the cover. It's a fabulous cover. All right. Let's face it, someone goes into a bookstore and sees this kind of cover, they're definitely taking this book off the shelf. All right. They want to know what's inside of it. Who designed the cover and who came up with the title?
Mary came up with the title.
Of course she did.
And my vision was, I had that vision in my head, and it was a company, the Pacific Ghostwriters that we worked with, that they actually came back with setups of the, for the cover, and I changed a couple of things, but I knew right in my head once I heard the title exactly what I wanted on there.
Right. So. And I like that you mentioned ghostwriters. There's a valuable lesson for people that have been English majors and got their master's in creative writing. Much easier for them to write a book. I
have to give a shout out.
Yes, let's do it.
Through my therapist, I met her daughter, Cassie, and Cassie edited my book so that when I sent it to the ghostwriters, I told them, I don't want anything really changed, because the way Cassie made my words sound, just because I can really be long-winded, and she just brought them down to an essence.
Right. That
when I started reading what she wrote, I actually said to her, are you in my head at night? Because that's exactly exactly the way she wrote it is exactly the way I would feel and I would say it. I mean, it was spot on, perfect. I mean, I had the perfect editor.
Brilliant. It's amazing how everything came together for you.
Oh, yeah, charmed.
Yeah, absolutely charmed. And the use of ghostwriters, especially with first time published people, it's really important to do that. My first book was Run on Sentences, Stream of Consciousness, and the person I work with was in Palm Springs. It would be 9:00 in New York, and he would get up at 6, and I would read him everything over the phone and email it to him. And then he would come back with it fixed up, but still in my words. However, if it was fixed up too much, I rejected it because that's not how I speak or how I think. I didn't want, I had to have me, the essence of me. And I have to tell you, Simone, this is completely you, this book, everything in it,
Well, when you do write and you get it edited and you have to revisit constantly, especially the painful stuff. Right. And every time I had to revisit it and rewrite a little bit or whatnot, it just rips you up.
Yeah.
And honestly, when my book finally got out, I had like a relief, a weight off my shoulders. Oh, it's finally done. I don't have to have that where I have to revisit this over and over and over, which is like being in therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you revisit it enough time so that you desensitize yourself. But there's some things in life you never desensitize.
Exactly. Was this book, would you say it was therapeutic for you to write it?
Very therapeutic. Yep. And I hope it helps someone that either knows someone that's trans that wants to kind of, get how they went through it. Someone that's either contemplating it or someone that even went through the transition.
Right.
Because there's so much history in there about the community, and there's some funny pipe fitter stories in there. I mean, the one I love is how I basically, a line from a movie kept me from getting an ass kicking in 1988, and I found that out in 2011.
What was the line?
Oh, you have to read the book.
She's not giving anything away.
No.
We have a couple of comments on here from Laura Cornier. We're proud to have you part of our pack, Simone. Laura's wonderful. Hi, Laura. Xavier Van Dyke. Hello. Is that Xavier from Colorado that was on the show?
I think so. Yep.
Hi, Xavier. How are you? Thank you for tuning in. It's incredible the amount of support you've got, Simone. How you've grown. None of this would have happened. I mean, now you're on the board of Out Montclair.
I know, go figure.
It's like, this is all stuff that would have never happened. And for somebody who wasn't a good student, you're a major speaker now. Think about all of this.
I know.
This is incredible what your truth has produced. I guess the lesson here that I want people to hear is, if you can do it, okay, if you can follow the path to the end, or even get off somewhere along the way, you'll have a better life. You'll have a happier life.
Yes, you will. You know, it's I read a book, and I talk about it a lot in this book, Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And one thing I learned was to be in service to others. Changed my life.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you have exactly been that. I don't know where the time went, but the time went. I always like to take a couple of pictures at the end. So just humor me, you know that. Just cheese.
Gee.
This is great having you. Real quick, tell people where they can find your book.
You can find the book at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Kindle, Nook, Kobo. I would appreciate a review, especially if you can do it on Barnes & Noble. And one other shout out to the clinicians that have worked with me at William Patterson University, the college girls that are training to be speech therapists. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You have given me my voice and allowed me to walk into the world freely, just be having this voice. Thank you.
How, I mean, you know, there's nothing more that can be said. You know, we hope that tonight people that are listening have learned something. Get the book. Simone told you where you can find it. Simone, how can people reach you? You're on Facebook?
On my Facebook, yeah, you can reach me there.
Okay.
You know, Simone Kraus on Facebook.
All right. And I guess eventually we're going to have a website, and we need to have all of that.
Yeah, I know. That's something I'm still learning this.
You're doing fabulously. Simone, I can't thank you enough. And thank you to everybody who tuned in tonight. And to your other half, Mary, you're the best. You really are. You're a very special person. Good night, everybody. Thank you.